Benning was the S3 and was an A Company commander. He's the director of the United Way down in Columbus, Georgia.
That's something, of course, I mean, a lot of folks have Georgia connections, but
Yeah.
now that means...
Bill Northwest, who became a C Company commander, was the county planner for Gwinnett County.
It is interesting. I think, I'm not sure, I was told the other day this building might close at 5:30, so we'll go ahead.
Okay. Well,
I'm not sure that's right or not.
I got us up to Duck Foe. What I did was I had 30 days leave because I extended at that time, and I went back to the States and did some things, and then had trouble getting back here.
And by the way, I think it's real commendable, not that my comments are worth anything, but it's very commendable to have others have that concern to stay in.
Most officers in our units did, and most senior NCOs did. That's why they still meet. But David Cook, who, and again, other groups didn't organize these reunions for us or whatever. The people did it themselves. You know, they didn't say, well, we're mad at the country because they didn't do this or do that. They weren't worried about all that. They decided that, hey, in the case of professional units like the 101st, their associations were in peacetime before or at least pre-Vietnam, and so they renewed them and just kept them going. And that's not true of everybody. I had never served with the 101st at Fort Campbell. I joined them in battle over there, and I left them in battle, and that was the last association I had with that unit. But anyway, when I got back from the States, they had been engaged in some very heavy battles and had taken a lot of casualties, so I got a company a lot quicker than I assumed. But Captain David Tambling was wounded. There was a lot of friendly fire incidents, and for whatever reason, an artillery shell exploded in his headquarters, and he was severely wounded. A lot of people were killed, and so I took over A Company, better known as ABU. And I won't explain what an ABU is, out in the field, just northwest of Duck Cove in June of '67. And I was the company commander of that company until I turned it over to Julius Johnson west of Chu Lai in November of '67. And I just had the privilege this week of meeting Julius for the second time. He's up in Washington, D.C. and works up there, and so we've gotten together and we'll see each other at a reunion.
Have you been back to Vietnam?
No, I don't have any desire to go there. Maybe if they get the Trang and the coastal areas fixed up, but I have my notes. I have the contact with the people. Never had ill will toward the Vietnamese people. I'm probably one of the few people that went there that understood. I'm not sure if you're familiar with ROTC in college, but the professor of military science and tactics at Lafayette College was a full colonel who had just come back from Southeast Asia from the predecessor to MACV. And probably he wasn't going to get promoted, and they gave him a job, for 2 years to get acclimatized to the civilian world and get known and so forth. But he personally taught a class that I took as a junior in college on writing staff papers and picked the topics. So not being a fool, one of the topics was, should the United States be involved in Southeast Asia? And in 1960, the area of concern was Laos. And the British and the Indians and the Trilateral Commission that had ended the Vietnam War and drawn up the parallel after Dien Bien Phu were all involved in those things. And what was interesting to me as a history major in college at the time was when I selected that topic to write, there was almost zero military publication on that area of the world. There was almost zero civilian information of a serious nature on the population, the culture, or anything in that part of the world in English and to a certain extent in French. So if you wanted to study flora or fauna, you could read it. But since it was a French-Indonesian colonies, there wasn't a lot of information. So when writing that report, almost all of the information, and I still have that report and I read it every now and then, because my advice at that time for that staff paper was that we should not be involved in Indochina, but not for a lot of the political reasons that people think of today. Militarily, logistically, it would just be a nightmare and hard to support. And the other reason was we didn't have a lot of information. So the original source documents, of which there were zero, were replaced by many articles in U.S. News and World Report, Times, and so forth, and all of these publications at that time were hawkish. So I keep that as a reminder of how fickle, the public can be. And it's also a commentary on the fact that although the so-called military-industrial complex, whatever that is, was giving money to universities and colleges for research for hardware, there's almost zero, if any, money going to the equally as important information on the peoples, the customs, and the traditions. And as we all know, that caused a substantial bit of problem.
Now you mentioned that you have an interest in writing a book.
Mm-hmm. The book that I would like to write, though, is for the soldiers and families of the units. As I said, there was a high turnover of personnel. The average soldier, E4 or below, even if he was highly skilled, in combat, would not normally have the map or the big picture, and in many cases they didn't know where they were. So in one of those battles in I Corps, the troops of the 1st Brigade talk about Mother's Day Hill. They don't have the coordinates. They haven't seen the after-action report. They may or may not know other units involved. So that's one of the reasons for it. The other reason for it is certain lessons of military history never change. And I was asked to go up to talk to a company that I commanded at Fort Campbell, and I told the company commander I wouldn't do that. I would come up and I would bring things, and they would say, please touch or please ask, including this map. And so even though you have modern weapons, for example, modern communication, there's always a weak link. And with Americans, it always seems to be the power source, whether it's batteries or this or that. We're always going to rely on the Air Force. And the reality in many combat situations, for whatever reason, is these things are not going to work. So you have to go back to your basics of firepower and maneuver. If you're an infantry officer, you have to go back to the basics of how do we create surprise. This chopper's coming over, it makes a lot of noise. How do we surprise the enemy? Well, maybe you do it by flying multiple choppers on multiple routes so that they know that the choppers are there, but they don't know which one you're in. How do you create surprise? They know that Americans have all sorts of technology. We used to have little transistor radios that we'd get from the PX, and we might leave them in the site where the enemy, we would hope, think that we were there that night and move 2 clicks away and conduct our business, but ambush our own site. And invariably, we would get people that were sent up there to see that we were there or whatever, and of course we weren't. Invariably, we were able to conduct our operations because the enemy didn't believe that we would move at night and could do, the same types of things that they were successful in doing.
Well, go ahead if you have any closing comments, because I let them have their building back here.
Right. Without commenting on the political side of the war and just talking about military operations, I was glad that I served. I had 3 uncles in the armed forces in World War II. I had a father in the Merchant Marine. I had a grandfather that designed ships, and I just feel that it's a part of the tradition of this country, and if not the draft, I think that every man, woman, and child ought to serve some type of service. Freedom isn't free. It costs, and people pay for it. And I would like to see the military remain physically fit and have the things that they need to win, not just to fight. And I would like to see the government and the people respect and take care of those commitments that they made to these people. And in the opinion of many who have served, this isn't always the case. So thank you very much for giving me the...
Very well said. I'm glad we ended with that. That's so true. Well, again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I'll need to unhook those before you get up there.